It was the type of night where everything felt too quiet, like the world had paused and was waiting for something to happen. The kind of silence that made you feel a little uneasy, like you were on the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to jump or pull back. I didn't know why I had agreed to go to that party. I didn't even want to be there. But, as usual, I didn't have the courage to say no to Eleanor. Let me clarify, Eleanor wasn't my wife. Not yet, at least. We had been living together for over 2 years, but things had started to change. At first, it was subtle. The way she'd get lost in her phone when I was talking, or how she'd smile at her friends just a little too long. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just me being insecure. But deep down, I knew something was slipping through my fingers. That night, she looked beautiful, of course. She always did. She had that effortless elegance about her, the kind that made everyone take notice when she walked into a room. As she grabbed her coat and turned to me, her eyes gleaming with a hint of excitement, I had this strange feeling in the pit of my stomach. Not excitement, not joy, just uncertainty. "We're going to a party, you know," she said, her voice light, almost teasing. "I'll meet you there, okay? I want to catch up with some people." I barely registered her words as she walked out the door, leaving me to finish getting dressed. It was a strange thing, that feeling. It wasn't that she was dismissive, not really. She was just distant. Like there was a space between us now, a gap I couldn't quite bridge, no matter how hard I tried. The party was at a house I'd never been to before, full of people I didn't know. Eleanor had told me it was casual, but when I stepped inside, I immediately realized that she had lied. This was the kind of party where people were loud and overly friendly, where everyone seemed to know each other except for me. I felt out of place instantly, like I was wearing the wrong clothes for a world I didn't belong in. As soon as we walked in, Eleanor disappeared into the crowd. I stood at the doorway for a moment, watching her laugh with some strangers, making them feel like they were her best friends. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even envy. It was just confusion. Why was she so eager to be the center of attention tonight? She had always been social, but something about her energy was different. She seemed almost untouchable. I found a seat in the back of the room, nursing a drink I wasn't even sure I wanted. People came and went, but none of them ever stayed long enough to really talk. I was fine with that. The longer I stayed in the shadows, the easier it was to avoid the growing sense of disconnection between Eleanor and me. The more I observed, the more I began to notice strange details, small things that felt like they were adding up, like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't complete. At one point, I saw her walk up to a guy I didn't recognize. He had that confident, too cool for school vibe, and when he leaned in to talk to her, something inside me clicked. Eleanor smiled, but it wasn't the usual smile. It was more deliberate. It didn't reach her eyes. I told myself it was nothing. It was just a conversation. But when I glanced away, I could feel my heart racing, like I was trying to convince myself that I wasn't overthinking things. I was about to leave. I had convinced myself I'd had enough, that I needed to get away from whatever this feeling was. This feeling that Eleanor was becoming more of a stranger than the woman I once thought I knew. But then something unexpected happened. A woman I didn't recognize approached me. She was dressed casually, with short, dark hair that framed her face in a way that was almost intentionally messy. She didn't smile at first. She didn't offer a handshake. She just looked at me and said, "You look like you want to leave." I didn't know how to respond. I hadn't said anything, nor had I made any attempt to leave. But she was right. I didn't want to leave. "Maybe," I said, unsure of why I was being so honest with her. "I don't really fit in here." She nodded as if she'd already figured that out. "You're here because of her, aren't you?" I looked at her, confused. "Who?" "The one who just walked off with Mr. Too Cool." Her tone was soft, but sharp at the same time. "You're with Eleanor, right?" I wasn't sure what to say. "Yeah. I mean, kind of. We've been living together for a while now." She studied me for a moment, then glanced over at Eleanor, who was laughing with the guy again. "You're in love with her, right?" she asked, as if it were the simplest question in the world. I didn't answer right away. Of course, I loved her. But saying it out loud, especially in that moment, felt strange. It felt like saying something that was too obvious, too vulnerable. "Sometimes it feels like I don't even know her anymore," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Like she's becoming someone else." The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, as if she knew exactly what I meant. "You're not the only one who feels that way," she said, her voice low. You're not the only one she's distancing herself from. I blinked, trying to process what she was saying. What do you mean? But before she could answer, Eleanor appeared behind me. She tapped me on the shoulder, her fingers cold against my skin. There you are, she said, the same cheery tone she always used. But it was forced. I could hear it in her voice. Come on, let's dance. And just like that, I was pulled back into her orbit, back into the role I'd been playing for the last 2 years, the dutiful boyfriend, pretending everything was okay. But as we made our way to the dance floor, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap I didn't understand. The music was louder than usual, the bass vibrating in my chest as Eleanor dragged me to the dance floor. I wasn't sure if it was the atmosphere or the alcohol in my system, but everything felt like a blur. She was smiling, laughing, but it was a smile I couldn't place anymore. Her eyes sparkled, but not for me. They were bright with a different kind of energy, one that felt like it had been siphoned away from me. I tried to focus, tried to shake off the discomfort creeping up my spine, but the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. We moved together in rhythm, but it didn't feel like we were connected anymore. She was there, but not really. My body followed the beat, but my mind was somewhere else. It was like I was playing a part, pretending that everything was okay. And then there was him. The guy from earlier, the one who had caught my eye with Eleanor. He was standing near the edge of the dance floor, chatting with a group of people. His gaze flickered toward us for a brief moment, and I could feel it. The way his eyes lingered on Eleanor, the subtle tension in the air. He didn't just look at her like a stranger. He looked at her like someone who knew exactly who she was. The way he held himself, the way his lips curved in a smile when he caught her eye, it was too much. It was like there was a secret I wasn't in on, a quiet understanding between them that I couldn't see. I tried to push the thought aside. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just paranoid. But as we danced, the pit in my stomach only deepened. Eleanor moved with a fluidity I couldn't follow, a grace I had seen 1,000 times before, but tonight it felt different. She didn't need me. She didn't need anyone. And for a moment, I wondered if I was just a placeholder in her life, a convenient companion for a time when she didn't want to be alone. At some point, she stopped dancing and pulled me closer, pressing her lips to my ear. I'll be right back, she whispered, her breath warm against my skin. I just need to go talk to someone. And just like that, she was gone. 1 minute we were close. The next she was slipping away from me, disappearing into the crowd like she had done so many times before. I stood there, feeling a strange sense of emptiness wash over me. I told myself to relax, to not make something out of nothing, but the unease only intensified. It wasn't just that she had walked away. It was the way she had done it. It was the casualness of her departure, like she had something else to attend to, something more important than me. I looked around the room, my eyes scanning the faces of strangers, but it was hard to focus. My mind kept drifting back to Eleanor. I wanted to find her, to ask if everything was okay, but part of me was afraid of what I might find. So, I stayed rooted to the spot, nursing my drink, watching people come and go, pretending like it didn't matter. But then, something unexpected happened. I was standing there, lost in my own thoughts, when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around, expecting it to be Eleanor. Maybe she had come back. Maybe she had just needed a moment to breathe. But no, it wasn't her. It was the woman from earlier, the one who had struck up a conversation with me in the bathroom. She had that same look on her face, that knowing expression that made me feel like she could see right through me. You're still here, she said, her voice quiet, but laced with something I couldn't quite place. I thought you would have left by now. I didn't know how to respond to that. I had no intention of leaving, but now I was starting to question why I had stayed. I'm just waiting for Eleanor, I said, even though I wasn't sure why I was telling her that. She nodded, her gaze flicking over to where Eleanor was now talking to the guy. I could see them clearly from where we were standing. Eleanor, her laughter a little too bright, her body language too open. And him, standing a little too close, his eyes locked on hers like they were the only two people in the room. It was a dance I had seen before, a silent communication that only they understood. It felt like the world around me had faded, like I was the only one who wasn't in on the joke. Do you really think she's going to come back to you? The woman asked, her voice suddenly sharp. You've seen the way she's been with him all night, haven't you? I froze. My heart skipped a beat. The woman's words hung in the air between us, heavy and accusing. I didn't want to believe her, but I couldn't ignore the truth that was right in front of me. Every small glance, every little touch between Eleanor and the guy had led to this moment. The truth was undeniable. I tried to shake it off, tried to convince myself I was just being paranoid. But the woman wasn't done yet. She leaned in closer, her voice low. You've been living in a bubble, haven't you? You're not the first to notice. You're not the first to feel left out. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to argue, to say something to defend Eleanor, but I couldn't. What could I say? What was there left to say when the truth was staring me in the face? Before I could respond, she took a step back, as if she had said all she needed to say. Maybe you should talk to her, she suggested, her eyes narrowing slightly. Or maybe it's time to stop pretending. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, stunned and unsure of what to do next. The music continued to thrum in the background. People continued to laugh and dance, but I felt like I was frozen in time, unable to move, unable to make sense of anything. Eleanor was still talking to the guy, still smiling, still laughing. And I was left wondering, had I been blind to everything all along? The night wore on, but I felt like I was sinking deeper into something I couldn't escape. My thoughts, once scattered, were now forming a terrifying clarity. Eleanor was different tonight, different in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. I watched her from across the room, standing with the guy. The laughter, the way she touched his arm, it was too familiar, too intimate. My mind kept flashing back to the moments that had led up to this. The late nights she'd come home late, the times she'd look at her phone, quickly turning it away when I tried to glance at it. The distant glances, the forced smiles. I should have noticed sooner. I should have paid attention to the signs. But I hadn't. And now, here I was, stuck in a room full of people I didn't know, watching the woman I loved drift further away from me. I thought about leaving, just walking out the door and leaving her behind. But I couldn't. I couldn't just walk away from everything we'd built, from the life we had together. Even if it felt like she was slipping through my fingers, I had to know. I had to confront this. I had to hear her say it, whatever it was. I needed the truth. But before I could act on that impulse, something unexpected happened. Are you okay? A voice cut through my thoughts, and I turned to find Olivia standing next to me. She was holding a drink in her hand, her face creased with concern, but there was something else in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or something more. Yeah, I said, trying to play it cool, trying to mask the storm raging inside me. Just trying to figure some things out. She took a sip of her drink, her gaze shifting to where Eleanor and the guy were still talking, their heads leaning in just a little too close. You're not blind, Olivia said softly, her voice quiet enough to be a secret, but loud enough for me to hear every word. You know what's happening, don't you? The weight of her words hit me harder than anything else had that night. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. What could I say? She didn't need me to explain. She knew. Olivia had been in my life long enough to know that I wasn't the kind of person who would just let something go. I wasn't the type to keep quiet when I saw the cracks. But I also wasn't the type to accuse, to stir up drama. But right now, I didn't know what I was anymore. I felt like a stranger to myself, standing there, watching the woman I loved act like someone completely different. She's been like this for a while, Olivia continued, her voice dropping even lower. But she doesn't think you see it. She doesn't think you notice. But you do, don't you? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What are you talking about? Olivia's eyes flicked over to Eleanor again, this time with a hint of something I couldn't quite decipher. Pity? Sympathy? Maybe even something darker. She's not the same anymore. You know that, right? She's. Olivia hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. She's been seeing someone else. You're not the only one, you know. It's been going on for a while now. The thing is, you just didn't want to see it. I could feel my pulse quicken. Was this real? Was she telling me the truth, or was this some cruel joke? But Olivia's face didn't carry the usual smirk she wore when she teased me. No, this was different. There was nothing playful in her eyes. She wasn't trying to hurt me. She was just telling me what I already knew deep down, but didn't want to admit. I couldn't speak. My body felt heavy, my mind reeling, trying to process the enormity of what she was saying. Eleanor had been seeing someone else. Someone else? How could I not have seen it? How had I been blind to all the signs? I didn't want to be the one to tell you. Olivia continued, her voice softer now. But I think you deserve to know. You deserve the truth. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed any of this yet. But it made sense, didn't it? All the little moments that I had brushed off suddenly rushed back to me with painful clarity. The way she had been distant, the way her eyes would flicker when she saw that guy at the bar, the way she never seemed to be fully present with me anymore. How had I let this happen? Before I could respond, I noticed something. Eleanor and the guy were heading toward the door, their voices low, their laughter barely audible over the music. The way they moved together, the way they shared that moment, it was so obvious now. They were leaving together. No question about it. I felt a coldness spread through me, a mixture of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. How could she do this to me? After everything, after all the years we spent together, how had she gotten to this point? And why hadn't I noticed sooner? I stood there, frozen, unable to move. I wanted to follow them, confront her, demand answers. But I couldn't. I didn't know how to process this. My mind was still spinning. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of disbelief. And then, just as I thought I was going to lose control, Olivia's hand landed gently on my arm. "Don't," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Don't chase after her. Not tonight." I stared at her, the words catching in my throat. "What do you mean? She's leaving with him. She's been lying to me. I deserve to know." "I know you do," Olivia interrupted softly. "But you don't have to get the answers from her right now. Not when you're like this. You're too upset to have a conversation that matters. Let her go. Let her make her choice. You're better than this. You deserve someone who actually sees you." I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream. I wanted to follow her, drag her back, and force her to face me. But for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of what Olivia was saying. Maybe it wasn't about the answers anymore. Maybe it was about letting go. I watched as Eleanor disappeared through the door, her back turned to me as she stepped out into the night with him. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I felt like I had no place in her world. For the first time in years, I was invisible. The hours after they left felt like a lifetime. I couldn't leave the party. Not yet. I stayed there in that strange, empty space, surrounded by a crowd of people I didn't know, while my entire world crumbled outside those walls. It was as though everything was moving in slow motion, and I was stuck, unable to keep up. I kept thinking about what Olivia had said, the truth she had handed me with such quiet certainty. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood, that maybe this was all some mistake, some terrible misreading of the situation. But deep down I knew. I knew Eleanor was walking away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I stepped outside, taking a deep breath in the cool night air, trying to steady myself. The world was quieter out here, but the silence in my head was deafening. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't stop replaying every conversation, every touch, every moment where I had felt something was wrong, but had pushed it away. How could I have been so blind? I needed to see her. I needed to hear her say it. I needed her to tell me that everything wasn't just a lie. So, I did what I'd never thought I would. I left the party. The streets were quiet, the night wrapped in darkness, but the streets weren't empty. People walked by, laughing, shouting, completely oblivious to the storm that had just started to unravel my life. I found myself walking faster, my mind racing, my heart beating in my throat. What was I even going to say to her? What could I possibly say? It wasn't long before I reached the corner of the street where the bar was. I stopped for a moment, my breath coming out in sharp, uneven gasps. The door was still cracked open. I could see silhouettes inside, people laughing, moving, talking. And then, through the glass, I saw them, Eleanor and the guy. They were standing just outside the door, leaning against the brick wall, their heads close together. It was impossible to miss the way their bodies were angled toward each other, the way they shared that private moment, that unspoken connection that was never meant for my eyes. I couldn't move. My legs felt frozen, as if the weight of everything had settled into my bones. I wanted to shout. I wanted to run toward them, to make her stop, to make her face me. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there in the darkness, watching, helpless, as the woman I loved seemed to disappear further into the night. But it wasn't just that. It was the way they looked at each other, the ease in which they stood there. They weren't hiding anything. They weren't ashamed. They were comfortable. Too comfortable. That's when it hit me. Eleanor hadn't been the one to slip away. I had. My thoughts began to spiral out of control. I wondered how long it had been happening. Was it just tonight? Had it been going on longer? The lies. The secrecy. The whispers in the night that I had ignored, hoping everything would get better on its own. I realized then that the whole time I thought we were drifting apart, she had already made her decision. She had already moved on, and I had been too stubborn to see it. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching them, waiting for her to look my way, but she never did. She never even noticed me standing there, watching the destruction of everything I thought I knew. The reality of it settled in like a cold weight in my chest. The woman I had shared everything with, the one I thought I understood more than anyone else, was someone I no longer recognized. She wasn't just pulling away. She was already gone. I turned and walked away without a word. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I didn't know what I wanted to find. But I had to leave. I had to get away from it. From her. From everything. The walk back to my apartment was a blur. I couldn't remember the streets I passed or the people who glanced at me. It felt like I was living in a dream, one where nothing was real, and I was the only one awake. By the time I reached the door, I was trembling, my hands shaking as I unlocked it. The apartment felt eerily quiet. It was just the two of us here. Or at least it had been. I walked into the living room and stopped. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I thought, maybe, just maybe, I was waiting for her to come through the door, to tell me I was wrong, to tell me it wasn't real. But the longer I stood there, the more I realized how foolish I was. She wasn't coming back. Not tonight. Not ever. The anger came in waves. First, a small ripple, then a tide that crashed over me. The betrayal, the lies, the silence. How had she done this to me? How could she do this to us? But as I stood there, fuming in my empty apartment, I knew something deeper had to be dealt with. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me. The man I had become, the man I was willing to ignore the truth for, to keep everything comfortable. I had been living a lie just as much as she had. I had seen the signs and done nothing. I had allowed the cracks to spread, pretending they weren't there. And now, everything was broken. I took a deep breath, my chest tight, my mind still racing. I was in too deep now, and I didn't know what to do next. But one thing was clear, I couldn't keep pretending. I had to face this. I had to face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. And as I sat down on the couch, my hands clenched into fists, I realized something else. I had no idea how I was going to survive this. But whatever happened next, I had to find a way to pick up the pieces of myself, because I couldn't let her take everything. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed the scene outside the bar over and over again. Eleanor laughing, her head tilted back, her hand brushing against the guy's arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. I tried to force myself to think about something else, anything else. But every time I turned away from the image in my mind, it came rushing back, clearer than before. It felt like the universe had suddenly revealed a truth I had been too blind to see, and now it was impossible to ignore. By morning, I was still awake, sitting in the same spot on the couch, my head buried in my hands, the weight of what had happened settling into my bones. I couldn't stop the thought from gnawing at me. How long had she been lying? How long had she been with him? How long had she been distancing herself from me, and I hadn't noticed? I had to know. I needed to hear it from her, to get some sort of explanation. Even if it shattered me, I needed to know the truth. I couldn't reach her. I tried calling her phone several times, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted her, asking if we could talk, but there was no reply. Hours passed, and the silence between us grew heavier. Every time I checked my phone, every time I tried to call, it felt like a reminder of just how far away she had gone. I spent the entire day pacing the apartment, replaying every conversation we'd ever had, every moment we'd spent together. Was I the one who had been blind? Was I the one who had let things slip between us? And what had she been feeling all this time? How had I missed it? By late afternoon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed to see her. I needed to confront her face to face, to demand answers. I grabbed my jacket and left the apartment, stepping out into the cool evening air. The walk to her place felt endless. My mind was racing with questions. What would I say when I saw her? How could I possibly make sense of everything I had just learned? And what if she wasn't even there when I arrived? What if she had already moved on? When I reached her building, I stood in front of the door for a long moment, hesitating. My hands were shaking, and my heart was pounding in my chest. I couldn't go through with this, could I? But the thought of walking away without answers was even worse. I took a deep breath and pressed the buzzer. It was only a few seconds before I heard her voice through the intercom. Yeah, it was her. I hadn't expected her to sound so calm, so indifferent. My throat went dry, and I struggled to find the right words. "It's me," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I need to talk." There was a long pause, and for a moment, I thought she was going to hang up. But then, she buzzed me in. I ascended the stairs to her apartment, my mind racing with 1,000 different thoughts, none of them making sense. I knocked on the door, but when she opened it, she didn't look surprised to see me. It was almost as if she'd been expecting me. "Hi," she said, her voice soft but detached. There was a strange calmness in her demeanor, one that felt out of place. She didn't even try to hide the fact that she had been drinking. There was a glass of wine in her hand, and her hair was slightly messy, as if she had just gotten out of bed. But she was still the same Eleanor, beautiful, composed, and utterly out of reach. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She stepped aside and motioned for me to come in, but there was no warmth in her gesture, no welcoming smile, just the cold, uncomfortable silence that seemed to settle between us the moment I stepped over the threshold. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do, until she spoke again. "Sit down," she said, her tone flat, as if she were instructing me, not inviting me. I sat down on the couch, trying to steady my nerves. The tension in the room was unbearable. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, was pressing on me, suffocating me. I didn't know how to start. I didn't know how to ask the questions I needed answers to without sounding desperate, pathetic. "Eleanor," I said, my voice shaking, "what's going on? What's happening between us?" She didn't answer right away. She took a sip of her wine and stared out the window, her back turned to me. I could see the way her fingers curled around the glass, the way she was avoiding me, avoiding the truth. "I don't know," she finally said, her voice low. "I think we've both known for a while, haven't we?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I had been hoping for some sort of denial, some explanation, anything to make this make sense. But she was right. We both knew. "You're with him, aren't you?" I asked, my voice cracking as the words left my mouth. "You've been seeing him behind my back." She turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw something other than indifference in her eyes. There was a flicker of guilt, of regret, but it was buried deep beneath the walls she had built around herself. "It's not like that," she said quickly, but I could tell she was lying. The words didn't ring true. They felt empty. I don't know how to explain it. Things have been different between us for a long time. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you." The truth hit me like a slap. I had been living in a delusion, waiting for things to go back to how they were. But they never would. She had moved on, long before I even realized it. She had checked out of our relationship without ever telling me. "I deserve the truth, Eleanor," I said, my voice shaking now. "I deserve to know everything. I deserve to know why." She took a deep breath and set her glass down on the table. Her eyes met mine, but there was no emotion in them. "It's not you," she said softly. "It's me. I changed. And I think you did too. But I don't know how to fix it anymore." I could feel the tears welling up, but I fought them back. I didn't want to show her how much she was hurting me. I didn't want to give her that satisfaction. But everything inside me was unraveling. Everything I thought I knew about us, about our love, was gone. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "I didn't want to hurt you," she repeated. But I could see in her eyes that she had already checked out. She had already made her choice. And now, here I was, trying to salvage something that was beyond repair. I stood up, my body trembling with the weight of everything she had just said. "You've already hurt me, Eleanor," I said, my voice cold. "You've already broken me." And with that, I walked out. I stepped out of Eleanor's apartment with my chest tight, as though all the air had been sucked out of the world. The door clicked softly behind me, and for a moment, I stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to grasp what had just happened. My mind couldn't keep up with the flood of emotions rushing through me. Anger, sadness, disbelief, and the worst of all, emptiness. The person I had loved, the person I had built my life around, had just told me she didn't want me anymore. Worse, she had already moved on. She had been gone for a while now, and I had been too blind to see it. I barely remembered the walk back to my apartment. I was on autopilot, my legs carrying me through the streets without my mind fully present. My phone buzzed in my pocket several times, but I didn't check it. I didn't want to know what anyone was saying to me. I didn't care. When I finally reached my apartment, I stood outside the door for a long time, staring at the handle. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to face the silence that awaited me inside. I didn't want to confront the fact that I had no idea who I was anymore. I had given so much of myself to Eleanor. I had lost myself in her and in our relationship, and now I was left with nothing. I had nothing left to give. I walked inside, the familiar scent of the place hitting me like a punch in the gut. It was supposed to feel like home, but tonight, it felt cold, foreign, empty. I tossed my keys onto the counter and collapsed onto the couch. The room was spinning. My mind was spinning. I wanted to scream, to punch something, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. I couldn't change what had already been broken. I couldn't fix what had been destroyed by lies, by distance, by a betrayal I never saw coming. I glanced at the clock. It was late, but I couldn't sleep. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. I thought about calling someone, maybe Olivia, maybe a friend, just to have someone to talk to. But I couldn't bring myself to reach out. What was there to say? What could anyone say to fix this? No one could fix this. No one could undo what Eleanor had done. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, the silence suffocating me with each step. I poured myself a drink, not even caring about the taste, just needing something to dull the pain. I downed it quickly, then poured another, repeating the process until I was too drunk to think clearly. It was a bad idea. I knew it was a bad idea, but it was the only thing that gave me temporary relief from the gnawing ache in my chest. But even alcohol couldn't numb the truth. The reality that I had been living in a lie for so long. The reality that Eleanor was gone, and I was just too late to stop it. I collapsed onto the couch again, the room spinning, and closed my eyes. But no matter how much I tried to block it out, the truth kept coming back. Eleanor had made her choice. She had made it long before I showed up at her door tonight. She had chosen him. She had chosen someone else. And no matter how much I tried to make sense of it, no matter how many times I told myself it was all her fault, I knew I had played a part in this too. I had let things slip. I had ignored the signs. I had let the distance grow between us until it became a canyon that neither of us could cross. And that was the hardest truth of all. It wasn't just her. It wasn't just him. It was us. It was me too. I had let it happen. I had stayed silent. I had let her drift away because I was too afraid to face what was happening. I was too afraid to confront the fact that we were falling apart. I don't know how long I lay there, the drunken haze blurring my thoughts, but at some point, my phone buzzed again. This time, I reached for it without hesitation. It was a text from Olivia. "I'm sorry. I know you're hurting, but I want to be here for you. Just let me know when you're ready to talk." For a moment, I just stared at the screen, the words blurry as my vision swam. I thought about texting her back, telling her everything that had happened, but something inside me told me it wouldn't change anything. I had no answers. I had no words. And I wasn't ready to face anyone else's sympathy. Not yet. I put the phone down and sank further into the couch. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in on me as the weight of it all pressed down. I had lost her. I had lost everything I thought I knew about myself, about us. And there was no going back. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the sound of cars passing by, of people living their lives, oblivious to my world falling apart. They didn't know. They didn't care. But it didn't matter. Because in that moment, I felt completely, utterly alone. And nothing was ever going to change that. I closed my eyes again, willing sleep to take me, to shut down the thoughts that kept swirling in my mind. But even in the darkness, I knew I wasn't done yet. This wasn't the end. Not yet. I had to make a choice. I had to decide what I was going to do with the wreckage she had left behind. Because, whether I liked it or not, I had to keep moving forward. I had to find a way to rebuild. And that, I realized with a sinking heart, was the hardest part. Moving on. Without her. But I didn't know how. Not yet. I woke up the next morning with a pounding headache, the kind that felt like my skull was being crushed from the inside. The room was still dark, and I could barely make out the shadows on the walls as I rubbed my eyes, trying to push through the fog of sleep. My head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that matched the emptiness I felt inside. I didn't want to face another day. I didn't want to face the reality that had set in the night before, but there was no escaping it. Eleanor was gone, and I had no idea what to do with myself. I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and stumbled toward the kitchen. The apartment was eerily quiet, as if the world had moved on without me. I grabbed a glass from the counter and filled it with water, trying to quench the dryness in my throat, but the water didn't help. Nothing did. I glanced around, but the place felt unfamiliar. It wasn't the home I had once shared with Eleanor. It was just a space, a shell where we had lived, and now I was here alone, trying to make sense of it all. I tried to call her again, but as expected, it went straight to voicemail. It was almost like I was waiting for her to come back and fix everything. Like if I just kept calling, kept trying, she would somehow realize that we belonged together. But the truth was undeniable. She was gone, and I had been too late to stop it. I didn't know why I was torturing myself like this. I had seen her choice with my own eyes. She was with him, and I had to accept that. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, my mind drifting from one thought to the next. It was like my brain was trying to process 1,000 different things at once, but nothing made sense. How had we gotten here? How had I not seen the signs? The cracks had been there for so long, but I had refused to acknowledge them. I had been content in the illusion that everything was fine, that we were fine. But we weren't. And now I was left to pick up the pieces. The silence in the apartment grew louder. It pressed down on me, suffocating me, until I couldn't breathe. I had to do something. I had to stop wallowing in self-pity, had to stop replaying everything in my mind. I needed to get out. I needed to see something, anything, to break the cycle of thoughts that had taken over my head. I grabbed my jacket and left the apartment, the door slamming behind me as I stepped into the cold morning air. The world outside seemed so different now, so distant, like I wasn't a part of it anymore. I walked without a destination, just moving through the streets as the weight of everything continued to press on my chest. The city was alive around me. People walking, cars honking, distant laughter, but none of it mattered. None of it reached me. I was lost in my own head, lost in the aftermath of a relationship that had crumbled, a life that had been shattered. As I walked aimlessly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't check it at first, but then I felt a strange pull, a desire to see what was waiting for me on the screen. I pulled it out and saw a text from Olivia. "I'm worried about you. Please let me know you're okay." I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to keep walking, keep pretending like I didn't need anyone. But deep down, I knew I did. I knew I couldn't face this alone, not anymore. I needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge me, someone who might understand. I took a deep breath and typed out a response. "I'm not okay. I don't know what to do anymore." It was the truth. I didn't know how to move on. I didn't know how to fix myself after everything that had happened. But Olivia was the only person who seemed to care, the only one who wasn't wrapped up in the drama of my life. She didn't have any expectations. She was just there. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Olivia's reply was simple. "I'm here. Let's talk." I didn't have the energy to fight it anymore. I didn't have the energy to pretend that everything was fine when it wasn't. So, I turned around and headed for the nearest coffee shop. I needed something hot to calm the shaking in my hands. I needed the comfort of something familiar, something that didn't feel like it was slipping away from me. When I arrived, Olivia was already there, sitting at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked up when she saw me, her face softening as if she had expected me to walk in at any moment. She didn't say anything at first, just gestured for me to sit down. I did, slowly, my body still heavy with the weight of everything. "How are you?" she asked, her voice gentle, but I could hear the concern there. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. How could I explain how I was feeling when I didn't even understand it myself? Instead, I just shook my head, my eyes burning from the lack of sleep and the endless flood of emotions. "I don't know what to do anymore," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I thought I knew who she was. I thought I knew what we had. But I was wrong. Olivia didn't interrupt. She just listened, her gaze steady and understanding. I didn't feel judged, not by her. I felt seen. For the first time in days, I felt like someone was actually paying attention to me, like someone cared about how I was feeling. "You're allowed to feel lost," Olivia said softly, her voice calm but firm. "You're allowed to feel hurt. But you can't stay like this forever. You have to make a choice now. You have to choose if you're going to keep holding on to her, or if you're going to start letting go." I swallowed hard. The words felt like a slap, but in the best way. She was right. I couldn't keep holding on to a relationship that had already ended. I couldn't keep chasing a ghost. I had to let go. But that didn't mean it was easy. It didn't mean that it was over. Because, even as I sat there with Olivia, I still didn't know if I was strong enough to walk away. The days after that conversation with Olivia blurred together, each one carrying its own weight, its own quiet challenges. But somewhere, amid the fog of confusion and sorrow, something shifted. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I began to feel a faint glimmer of hope, a small light at the end of a very long tunnel. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't perfect, but it was there. I kept telling myself that I had to let go, that I couldn't keep clinging to something that was no longer mine to hold. Every time I thought about Eleanor, I remembered what Olivia had said. You have to choose if you're going to keep holding on to her, or if you're going to start letting go. And little by little, I started to choose to let go. It wasn't easy. Some days, the grief would overwhelm me, and I'd feel like I was drowning again, as though the past was suffocating me. Other days, I found myself smiling at a memory, a laugh that once seemed so precious, and I'd feel a sharp pang in my chest. But then, I would remember, Eleanor had made her choice. And so had I. I focused on the things that had been pushed aside, the things that had always been a part of me, but had gotten lost in the noise of a relationship that had taken more than I could give. I started running again, the way I used to, feeling the wind against my face, each breath a small but significant victory. I reached out to old friends, the ones I hadn't talked to in months, maybe even years, just to remind myself that I still had a world beyond the one I had once shared with Eleanor. It felt strange at first, but the more I reconnected, the more I realized how much of myself I had forgotten in the years we were together. I went to a local art gallery, just to spend an afternoon alone with my thoughts. I hadn't done something like that in ages. No distractions, no expectations, just me and the art. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of joy. It was the kind of joy that comes when you remember who you were before everything fell apart, who you were before you got lost in someone else. One day, I woke up and realized something. It wasn't a sudden revelation, nor was it the kind of thing you can plan for. But as I stood in front of the mirror that morning, I saw myself for who I was. Not the broken version of myself that had been clinging to the past, not the man who had spent so many nights in despair. I saw someone who had survived. I saw someone who had the strength to move forward, even when it felt impossible. I decided to take the next step, not a big one, but a small one that felt significant. I contacted a therapist. I had been hesitant at first, but I knew deep down that it was time. I needed to unpack everything I had gone through, everything I had allowed myself to ignore, so I could heal properly. It wasn't weakness. It was strength. And then one afternoon, a few months later, something unexpected happened. I ran into Eleanor at a cafe. It wasn't planned. I didn't expect to see her, and I certainly didn't expect it to feel so normal. She was sitting at a table by the window, and for a moment, my heart skipped a beat. But when she saw me, she smiled. It wasn't the smile that had once held all the secrets, all the things we hadn't said. It was just a smile, calm, friendly, no weight behind it. It was like she was a chapter in my past that I had finally put behind me. We exchanged a few pleasantries, nothing heavy, nothing significant. But there was something in that moment that made me realize how far I'd come, how much I had healed. The pain was still there, but it wasn't the center of my universe anymore. I wasn't defined by her. I wasn't defined by the end of what we had. I was defined by who I was becoming. And as I walked away from that encounter, I felt the sun on my face. I felt a peace I hadn't known in a long time. I was moving forward. I was choosing to rebuild, to become something better, something stronger. It wasn't about erasing the past. It wasn't about pretending it never happened. It was about accepting it and choosing to grow from it. The road ahead wasn't clear, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I had learned that healing wasn't linear. It was messy, unpredictable, but it was mine. And no matter what came next, I knew that I was strong enough to handle it. I wasn't the same person I had been when everything fell apart. I had become something new, someone who had the power to move forward, one step at a time. And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed that I was going to be okay.